Morning, everyone. Such a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you so much for having us, joining us for this event dubbed Creating Change, Connecting Humanity. So we're going to be having a discussion around refugees and the kind of impact that they have towards our different countries. My name is Florence Ochola. I am the current country chair for Ecocivilisation in Kenya. And just to give you a bit of insight on who Ecocivilisation is and what we do, we will give, we have a description with with the founder or Violetta. So just take a minute to listen in to get to know more about Ecocivilisation.
Dear African Ecocivilisation community, dear Ecocivilisation wings, dear Ecocivilisation ambassador for Africa, dear Florence, Ecocivilisation wing for Kenya, the person who brought us all together. It is a real honor to share with you a few introductory words. Ecocivilisation community is inspired by outstanding women and men, the exuberant minds from all over the world who share a dream of humanity serving planet Earth and magical strength of water. We are committed to manifest the Charter of Ecocivilisation, which is inviting us all to collaborate together to sustain the planet as an ecozone of our galaxy, with inclusion and diversity at its core, enabling a universal knowledge and wisdom to develop endless ecosystems of collaboration, uplifting economy and society based on the laws of nature and the frequency of love. Collective involvement is making the world better, taking an informed actions and lead a dedicated engagement in order to find a sustainable solution for the pressing topics of societies today. And that's what humanity needs. The title of today's session is self-explanatory, creating change, connecting humanity. And where else to start than with the topic related to refugees, the effects of displacement and rehabilitation. There is an enormous potential for innovation towards developing more dignified solutions and help us all to human better. I'd like to thank Florence for her strength and dedication and for bringing such amazing people together. Interesting enough, the topic of refugees was also one of the core topics that I've discussed with the new Nigerian Ecocivilisation wing and her denim partner, and I'm happy to see her included in this discussion. I know that the world can learn a lot from Africa. We all can learn a lot from our Ecocivilisation brothers and sisters. I'm excited to hear the conclusions of the session and learn about possible steps forward to reinvent the concept of refugees and possibility to change the perception of camps into the modern concept of villages based on human dignity and creative strength that is hidden in every one of us. Thank you for this opportunity.
All right, thank you so much. And I will now hand it over to our moderator for the day, Ms. Flora Witi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Florence. I'd like to welcome all of you once again. So for now, we want to go into our discussion. So we're talking about refugees and the impacts of having refugees in our countries, in our various countries. What are the challenges they face? How can we integrate them? into our communities. So I will allow our panelists. We have 4 panelists. One panelist will join us a little later on. But for the panelists, kindly introduce yourselves to us. Also, let us know which country you're coming from as you do your introduction. Welcome. So we can begin with Eva.
Thank you, Flora. Good morning, everyone, or good whatever time it is, wherever you are. My name is Eva Kimani, as indicated by Flora. I am from Kenya. I work within the international development sector, and I am in project management. I do enjoy doing project management through a collaborative approach, and I have managed to do different projects or manage different projects along TVET, which is education, youth and skill development, but also in sustainability and climate change. And which is how then I got to also know about this through Florence Ochola. And I'm happy to be here. And I consider myself a tree hugger. And I am very keen about plastics and how plastics are used or reused or in terms of innovation. And I work a lot with young people, and I'm also passionate about that. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the interesting discussion.
Thank you so much, Eva. We can have Njoki next.
Hello, everybody. How are you? I'm Njoki Mwangi. I am from Mweza Consult, and I have been introduced to this group by Florence Ochola, and I am in Kenya and from Kenya. So I am a resource mobilizer, and I really am passionate about working with community development through project management, through projects which we manage through the people who are the community, so that they get a sense of ownership. And because of this, I have had the opportunity to work with various communities within Kenya and also with refugees. So that is the conversation those are the conversations we have been talking around with Florence, and that is why she invited me. So I look forward to I'm grateful to be here, and I'm really looking forward to sharing all our experiences for the benefit of all the communities that will be touched. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Njoki. We will have David.
Okay.
David, are you there?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Like I said earlier, it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor. I'm speaking from Nigeria. I'm the founder of 𝐂𝐫𝐞𝐚𝐭𝐢𝐧𝐠 Global Foundation, and I work with internally displaced persons. Ours is internally displaced persons, actually. You know, when you talk about refugees, they are like people that come into the country from another country, but ours are our own people that are displaced, that are living in camps. We were just newly introduced into the Ecocivilisation system, and we were introduced by Koli of Zimbabwe. I'm the co-chair of Ecocivilisation Nigeria. I'm not a man, I'm a woman. David Ime, that is my surname, but my name actually is Angoni. Gonimi. That's my name. So it's a pleasure to be here. I don't know yet how my own part is going to be infused into the refugee talk yet, but as we go on, we'll see how we're going to fuse it all together. So far, so good. We work with children, especially, but also we educate the children, and then we empower women, and then we also work with the elderly. Because the elderly people are also in these camps, we make them, have their feel good on, and we're going to see how they are also being integrated into the society. We do that through monitoring and evaluating the things that we are doing and how it also can be sustainable. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's still quite early over here, as you can see. There is nothing on my face. So just take me the way I am. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ime. So we have two other panelists who are yet to join us. So we're just going to begin with the three panelists that we have. What we're going to do is we're just going to have the responses of the three of them. So what we want to begin by asking for the three of you, what are the psychosocial impacts of having refugees on citizens of the host country? So what are the impacts of the citizens of your country? What are the psychosocial impacts that the citizens of your country have gotten as a result of having refugees in the country? So any three of you can begin.
All right, let me just come in here. When you talk about internally displaced persons in our country, Nigeria, I want to take us back to history. Actually, when Nigeria started experiencing internally displaced persons was during the Civil War, when we had the Biafra crisis in Nigeria. There was a war. Biafra was trying to break out to form their own nation. That is the eastern part of Nigeria. They wanted to break out with the south and some part of the west. But there was that was what caused the Civil War. And then immediately after the war, when peace was restored, after the signing of treaties and after the signing of, after the peace talk and after the agreement between the both parties, we had over 1 million people displaced. There was no water, no food, no houses, because all of these were scattered and shattered by the war. So that was the first time Nigeria ever had internally displaced persons. Just as the name goes, it is within Nigeria, it is in Nigeria. And the situation was very difficult for the situation to be curbed because, these people, their minds were interrupted. Why? Because their people had died, their friends, their families, their loved ones. These were breadwinners. Some of them have they had lost their children. So it was very chaotic at that point in time. But let me quickly take us forward to what now happened years down the line after that situation was managed. We now have, I know you're hearing about Boko Haram. In Nigeria, we face insurgency in the north, the far north. And the core northerners, majority of them are Muslims, but we also have Christians there. When the Boko Haram crisis started, it was alleged that it was a political, it was sponsored by the political elites to disrupt the then president that we had in Nigeria, who happened to be President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, from the minority, sect in Nigeria. He was from the South. So when he was there, after his successor had died, who was Yaradua. Yaradua was one very awesome president that his life was cut short because of his health crisis. And I think that man would have made Nigeria a better place because he had the sense of ownership. He had the sense of wanting to build Nigeria to what Nigerians wanted. That's by the way. So when the political elites, empowered the Boko Haram, it escalated. At a point, they couldn't handle the crisis. So Boko Haram came saying they didn't want education. They said education was a sin. They tagged a lot of modern civilization as not part of what they believe as Muslims. they started capturing villages. They started capturing states. Most parts of Borno, Maiduguri, one of the states we have in Nigeria, was captured by Boko Haram. Now, what do they do when they want to capture? They bring in their armies, they kill the people, because if you don't support them, you have to go. They kill them. So the ones that fled into the bushes, were the people that were now displaced. So the military intervened, brought those people that were in the bushes, brought them out, and took them to a place. That is why it's called internally displaced persons, from their state to the federal capital territory, where they have little huts built, and then they are kept there. The impact in the lives of the citizens, they are also citizens of the nation, remember? It's not one that we can begin to analyze to a conclusion in this meeting alone. The impact goes beyond their day-to-day, it goes beyond what they are experiencing, because what they are experiencing is a loss of livelihood, a loss of shelter, a loss of an environment that they are used to, a loss of their self-worth, their self-esteem, and their self-value. That is for the people that are internally displaced. Now, to the other people that are living in the city, before these other people were brought in, there is also a psychological effect on them. How? Remember when the population is not planned for, and all of a sudden, a population of 50 million people has escalated to let me say 50 million to 500, 50 million to 550 million. Let me take it like that. The 500,000 people that have joined these 50 million people, the number one crisis is housing. The number two crisis is the resources that are available for the people that were there. It has to be shared by these other people. Number three, which is the most challenging, is insecurity. Imagine you are in a place and you do not have a source of livelihood. It's not as if you were brought into that place and then a job was placed for you, or a job is ready for you to, start doing, to start earning. Their minds are very disturbed. They do all sorts to stay alive. They start stealing. They start breaking into people's houses. So there is trauma already in the society because of the integration of a people that are not used to the place, a people that are not planned for. The planning aspect is a very integral aspect in every and anything that we're doing. This is where the likes of the non-governmental organizations step in. It is unfortunate that in Africa, yes, I'm going to generalize it now, not just in Nigeria, in Africa, one of our biggest challenges is leadership. Our governments have not captured planning into it. We have not put planning into our day-to-day and year-to-year living. I am saying this because if there was a projection, because whether you like it or not, we have to project for natural disasters, we have to project for things like insurgency, communal clashes, because these are the things that happen without any form of, you cannot really predict that in 2025, Nigeria is going to be affected by this, and this. But even if we're able to project that Nigeria is going to be affected, what is the plan of the government in terms of budgeting, in terms of manpower, in terms of rescue? What is the plan that is put in place? These are things that are not there. So when you talk about the social, the psychological effect,
social,
yes, because it has to be psychology and then the social effect of these people that are integrated into the society. It's if we plot it on a graph, it's not linear. It is zigzag.
Thank you so much, Aimee.
Yeah, it is. I'm concluding now. It is one that have to pay serious attention to, because number one, human beings, and they need the love, attention, they need the value that they're supposed to have in order to cause further crisis in the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that very elaborate response to the psychosocial impacts of having the refugees in Nigeria. So I also want to take this time. We have one more panelist who has joined us, Innocent. So Innocent, kindly introduce yourself. The other panelists have already introduced themselves, and we're already into our discussion. So just please, I'll give you a moment to introduce yourself, and then I will ask the question, and then we can continue with the rest of the panelists. Over to you, Innocent.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and happy to be here. My name is Innocent. I'm the founder of 𝐂𝐫𝐞𝐚 Ventures, which is a social enterprise in the 𝐂𝐫𝐞𝐚 refugee camp that works to support the livelihood of the refugees and the host communities jointly. And on the other side, I also work as a consultant when it comes to humanitarian programming and operations. Thank you.
Please tell us which country you're coming from, which country you're representing.
Yeah, I come from the
or which experience you're representing.
And I'm based in Kenya. And, you know, coming to Kenya, it's because I was displaced first. And that's when I came to Kenya. And since that time, that was back in 2009, I've been living in Kenya. And so I look forward to have this discussion and to share more about the really life experience, you know, when you are in displaced settings and when, you know, you need to integrate or to live your goals, to turn around your life. You know, it's really something that we are going to discuss here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Innocent. So Innocent, the question that we have first that we are tackling right now is, what are the psychosocial impacts of having refugees on the citizens of the host country? So you came in when Aimee was giving us the situation in Nigeria. So now feel free. You can take a moment if you need to take a moment and catch up with the rest as we hear what the situation is from Eva and Njoki, and then you can contribute your opinions as well. All right, so thank you, Karibu Sana. So Eva and Njoki, does one of you want to go to give us a response?
Yes, please. I'd like to pick up after Ima because she's really picked on a lot of the. She's dealt with the onset of the refugee situation, and like I mentioned, I'm with resource mobilization. So we have worked a lot with the NGOs who come in, quote unquote, on a rescue mission. And probably what I'd like to mention is the challenges that we faced. Yes, they come in psychological and financial and all psychosocial challenges. And what I found was our biggest challenge in all the areas we have been is working with the partners who want to benefit themselves more than benefiting the people we're focused on. And what has been an annoying thing to work with, because you can see what they need, you know how to do it, and you know that we can do it. But we don't get the space to do it or the resources because they're withheld from us. And sometimes we're given really incredibly unfair conditions for us to get to receive the funding. And you have to be prepared to say no to some of these things, because if you get yourself involved, it's very difficult to get out of them. So one of the best experiences, if I can just share for 2 minutes, was the refugees who came in from, there were a host of them. They'd come into Kenya. We'd have counseling going on for a couple of weeks. And as they're beginning to open up and get to, adjust to their new environment, we would then begin to teach them English. And then we would have those who pass and who are prepared to move on, go out to mostly Canada, but they also had the option of a few other countries to go to. But the bulk of them
to be resettled.
to Canada. And to be resettled, yes. And some of them would come with family, some wouldn't. So those who came on their own, we would also help them look for the family members they had lost. Some we would find, most of course were either already passed on or were just lost. But that one went really well. Then we had another, that was in Nairobi, and most of them would come from Kakuma and do I remember where the other ones came? Somali, I think, was the bulk of them. Then we had another one in Dadaab and also in Kakuma. And those two, honestly speaking, because we had all the manpower and the how to, we really had a lot of challenges with the partners, because they're the ones who would come in and put the barriers. One of the situations I can probably share is we had a feeding camp, because they must eat when they come. So we had this put separately from the camps, the 3 camps in Dadaab. We would have it separate so that we could take care of them with their individual problems. And we wanted to then partner with with one of the donors who are under the UN umbrella, and they wanted us to put it inside the hospital, which we refused to do, because putting them in the hospital would expose them to infection and illnesses, which we didn't want to have to deal with, because ours was purely a feeding program. And actually, we turned down the donation because we said, if once they get unwell, who's going to take care of them? And then that's the situation that people would create for more funding to be sought. But we didn't need to seek for more funding because there was enough. That's just an example. And then also there was the element of income generation, because they come in and when they came in initially, the plan was to have them fed and taught some skills, taught how to make some money, and then sent back home when things are peaceful. And if they're not peaceful in where they came from, they could start here in Kenya and at least begin to earn an income and begin to become independent. But that was always, what's the word I would use? That was not promoted, because if they go back or become independent, then there'll be no need for asking for more donations. And that for me has been the biggest disaster we have, at least in Kenya. I think that's been the biggest, and this is in all the camps and in all non-camp situations. Even the time when we had the placed persons after the 2007 clashes, between the political clashes, it was the same thing. And this is what people ride on to keep seeking funds, but they don't come in to do what they're meant to do. And trust me, the funds come in large amounts, sufficient to take care of all those things. Yeah, so that for me has been my biggest nightmare.
All right.
And I
so let me ask you.
Yes, sorry,
Choki. You've actually answered the second question.
I'm sorry.
Yes, so I was no, it's fine. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. All right. I wanted to ask you, for you, in your experience, what have been the impacts, the psychosocial impacts on the host country, like the people who are the citizens, for example, of Kenya? Have you seen any psychosocial impacts on them? Because you've given us many of the challenges for the refugee space, but we will come to that as well. What about the psychosocial impacts of having the refugees in the country, in Kenya? Yeah. So on the citizens, Kenyan citizens.
The Kenyan citizens. Yes, of course. There's a sense of your space. We're now all sharing. The space doesn't change. And neither is there a pre-planned or organized planning for them. So we don't know how to deal with them. You feel that they've invaded your space. At the same time, you want to help them. And most times people are not able to help the way they would want to. And I think that's a lot to do with organizations that came in barging in, like, this is our work. Because when you get to have like one-on-one with some of them, and I've handled some from Rwanda, from Somaliland,
yes,
they're so ready to do what is best for them and their families. But then you can only do so much because they keep increasing. Like I have a friend who found one family of 38 people somewhere in Nairobi one time, and he took them and took them to his house. But within 2 years, he was completely broke because he had to feed them and feed them, and just the basics that other people come in to counsel them, what have you. But he was not getting support from the organizations because he was not working according to the terms. So there's
true.
And confusion. And what did I say? There's a word I'm looking for. It's like an oppression towards the locals who want to help. They don't want them to help. If you help them, then we're not going to have any problems to talk about. I don't know if I'm explaining myself here. That for me is...
It makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah. That for me has been my greatest annoyance. Yeah, because everything is manageable and we can help them. And we can actually even help repatriate them, but they don't want us to do that. So when
because of the lack now of this funding.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for your insight. We can hear also from Eva and then Innocent.
All right. Thanks, Flora. As Kenya, you know that we host one of the biggest refugee camps, which is in Kakuma, and I'm sure Innocent will go into details. I've heard that he works there. And we've been in the fortunate, or is it the unfortunate, but more fortunate that they were more stable as a country than the ones that have been around us. So if we think about Somali, if we think about Sudan, if we think about Rwanda and Burundi before, during the genocide aspect. So when you think from a psychosocial perspective, there is key things that I like to use analogies. When you think of your home country, or if it's in your house, if someone then just randomly comes, I would put it in that aspect, given that what happens is war, and sometimes that war doesn't, there could be feelers that the war is coming, but then you don't expect that. I mean, you hope that it doesn't escalate. So when you start off from a host community, there's aspects of suspicion. Who are these people who are then coming into our country? What is it that they're coming in to do? They are also coming into a space that is also stretched resources. For example, Kakuma is quite large. I've been there. I've worked with, in my space of work, we've worked in education in emergency and also conflict and conflict resolution. So they stretched resources, and the community around, like in Turkana, is already also having a problem with the resources. So water is an issue, housing is an issue, and then you have a community that comes in and is being provided by different agencies the resources easily. And therefore the host community wonders, okay, what about us? So also feeding into the stretched resources and also the aspects of the suspicion. But then there's also aspect of the disruption of the culture and the community. And so someone comes in, they're speaking French, the other person is speaking a different language, for example, whatever it might be, and you are not understanding each other. But then also in their culture, there's a way that they live. So for example, if it's the Ethiopians or it's the Somalis, and then they come in that community where the Turkanas are, even for them, they will be wondering, okay, so why are the Turkanas walking around without having covered their upper bodies? But now for the host communities, the Turkanas are wondering, why are they communicating this way? So there's a disruption of the culture. But then also the aspect of integration. So in Kenya, you will, even in Nairobi, we all know, and even when you go to other countries, and we'll say, oh, the Kenyans live here, the Rwandese are living here, the Ugandans live here, or the Sudanese are mostly in this region. And one of the things is, of course, for the refugees, they want to stay together and be able to bring a bit of home to themselves. But then what happens in terms of the integration to the host communities? And then we have the suspicion going back, or Somalis behave this way, Sudanese behave this way, or the Kenyans behave this way. But my final point as well, and that also really has irked me for a long time, and that's one of the things I always wonder, the effect on the environment when there is war, but also when we have such large areas where the refugees take up, or within different aspects. In Kakuma, one of the things, and also in Dadaab, one of the things I do know is the tree cover has gone down, because what happens is that wood and was the main fire or resource, energy resource. And also because of the putting up of the camps, then a lot of spaces had to be cleared off. So from a host community aspect, from a Kenyan perspective, one of the areas, it's also very arid in Turkana, or I mean in Kakuma, in Dadaab, and all these different areas. But also when displacement, or when war happens, or when there's displacement, the environment gets to suffer from different aspects. We have stretched all the kinds of resources, from the water, from the energy, from the green spaces. Those are taken over either to build the schools or to build the hospitals. And then that gives room to that there are no play areas for children, and even for agriculture in those aspects. I do know that there is innovation happening, and especially I think with the World Food Program, in terms of how do you then restore some of these spaces. But if I was to talk about from a psychosocial aspect, from a host community, the aspect of suspicion, just to summarize, stretched resources and the disruption of the culture, the aspect of integration, and the effect of the environment. Back to you, Laura.
Okay, thank you so much, Eva. And just, I think, listening to both Eva and Njoki, because I am also from Kenya and I have also worked in Dadaab, and I've also worked with urban refugees, just food for thought. Because you see, when it comes, for example, into the urban setting, yes, we'll find that there's that suspicion like you're talking about, but who takes the time also to be able to properly, to psycho-educate the members of the host country, the reasons why these refugees are here? Because many times the host country will believe, the people in the host country feel like, why are you here? Go back to your country. So many times they don't even know what is going on. They don't know, let's say, what is going on in Congo, in Rwanda. So just food for thought. So who psycho-educates the people in the host country about the situation of the refugees? All right, I will invite Innocent to give us his response on the psychosocial impacts of having refugees on the citizens of a host country. Over to you, Innocent.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think before we can talk about the social impact on the citizen, it's all about first, how much information do the locals have? Because, that's the starting point. And, this just to complement what other speakers have talked about. But for me, I'm talking about this on my personal experience, because when you come to Kenya, for example, when I arrived in Kenya, it was back in 2009, some of the people, maybe they were born here, they grew up here, they never even get out of the country, and they don't know what it looks like to be in a foreign country. And imagine you are coming from a foreign country. Maybe you have a language barrier. Maybe you have foreign currency. Maybe you have this or that barrier that can't allow you to get access to key resources, key services. And those services that we're talking about, they are essential, like basics one. And you find that person, when they arrive, even to interact with the local people becomes a challenge, because those people, most of them, some of them, they never knew that there's another world beyond our own space. And when someone comes in, they look at that person, let's say, as either as an investor or someone who's coming to get the resources. And we are hearing that everywhere in the world, wherever they are migrants, people, the first thing they say, either the migrant is an investor or the migrant comes to take up our opportunities. And now when it comes to the refugees, it's also about the status. Once you are told you are a criminal, it means everyone will start not even look at you. When you are taught like you are a pastor or I don't know, a bishop, then people will trust you. And when you say that you are a politician, maybe people say, this person can play with us, but we can grab money from him, and then we also vote them. It's all about knowing who you're talking about. And now, specifically, whenever the locals interact with the refugees, it happens that there's a way that they frame who is a refugee. And that's why the awareness, how much information do local people have regarding the refugees. And it doesn't only stops at the local level, I mean at the ordinary level. It goes even at the official level, because there are conventions, there are policies, there are this, that regulate the refugees that are global. For example, the Geneva Convention, that is most states have, let's say, amended, they accepted those conventions. But even they have accepted them, but the awareness within the internal services within that country is really very poor regarding the key recommendations or key aspect of the conventions. And for example, just something very clear. For refugees, for example, who want to travel abroad, they're given what is called the traveling document. That traveling document is a global document, a non-document. And that document is issued by the host country. For example, if you are a refugee in Kenya, then you are given a traveling document from Kenya. And that will allow you to go wherever you go and come back to Kenya without any problem. But within Kenya, where that document was produced, you go to the migration, and the person who is in the migration doesn't know that document. And is this document from Kenya? And yet it's written Kenya, how much awareness is not only at the ordinary level, but it can go even up to the official level, whereby people get discriminated. And that fit into what will be the next policy regulating the refugees in the country. Because, if you don't have much information, what will you talk about? How will you formulate your policy? And that's why we are now currently having this, let's say, exhausting policies. We are having these discriminatory policies where refugees are set apart and the local set apart. And yet, the refugees, when they come in the country, they bring in resources. For example, if you can look at the example of the Kakuma refugee camp, where we have most people are young, we are talking about youth, more than 70%. Those are resources that the country could use, or that could benefit the country, and maybe to develop something new. And when we talk about innovation, if I can just touch on the innovation, when you look at Kakuma, it's located in the Turkana, which is a more remote area comparing to other places in Kenya, where people are not really at the same pace like others, because either they're traditional, or maybe because of the way they want to continue. But there are refugees who came from major cities and who are sent to Kakuma, which is a remote area, a village kind of. That person will come up with some new idea, say, I can't live where there's no electricity. I can't live where there's no internet. Now, that person will try to work hard to bring that, let's say, that service closer to the refugee camp, which at the same time will benefit the locals. And that's how the locals and the refugees are both benefiting from the know-how of the refugees and the know-how of the locals, because they complement each other. But joining those dots, it's where we are having problems of discrimination, bad information, misinformation, and so on. And now it becomes a clash rather than becoming a cohesion. And when it comes now the psychosocial of the citizen, because that was just a background, it's more also about what you do, what your interests are, and so on. Because refugees, they get food ration, maybe that the local don't get. Maybe they get free basic Medicare, free basic, education, but that the local maybe don't get. And already that is a conflict, because the locals say, how comes these people, they don't do much, but they are given food every month, and us, we need to work hard to get that food. There are some of the traditional ways we are operating, which are really reinforcing the division between the people. And that should be looked for a new perspective, mostly to let people work, do their businesses, interact, because the more people are busy, the more there are less tension, because, for example, when you look at Uganda, where the refugees have there's an open policy to have refugees integrated into the local society, comparing to Kenya, where the policy is more restrictive. In Uganda, you know, the refugees, they can come, they do businesses, this, that, and, you know, the tension, even on social resources, it's really decreasing because instead of going, queuing, in front of an office, government office to look for assistance, you are queuing where you are finding a casual job, maybe at a factory, you know, or maybe at a construction site. And, you know, those are the kind of things that should be encouraged. And another aspect when it comes to access to resources, refugees fall into cracks. You know, you can have, let's say, a structure and the structure cracks. Then, you know, everything that will come, some might jump the cracks, but the refugees will more likely fall into cracks. Why? Because they don't fall anywhere. I come from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I live in Kenya. And whenever, for example, there's a social fund or a development fund, that will come maybe through the World Bank, that fund will come to Kenya, the Kenya government, to support Kenya youth, not Kenya refugees youth. That same fund will go maybe to Congo, support Congolese youth, not Congolese who are in diaspora or refugees outside. Where do the refugees get support from for them to rebuild back their future? Now, that put them also on a too much tension to really work beyond, to do even more, you know, than they can. And others, they just go for shortcuts. And that way now we end up having maybe some refugees choosing to say shortcut criminal, long way, hard work. And it becomes really very challenging to balance the two because it's confusion. You don't know who is criminal, who is not criminal, and say, okay, well, the refugees are criminal, maybe because you interacted with a refugee are criminal because of the constraints in which they are living. And that's how the psychosocial aspect really is very important because it plays on the mind of the people, and that's how they interact with the refugees, or the refugees also interact with the hosts, you know, the policy, the way they are framed. That's how the refugees frame Kenya. Say, yeah, Kenya is a really very harsh country when it comes to the refugee policy. And or say Kenya is really a welcoming country when it comes to refugee integration. Those are the things that they go based on the basis that we already have, either legal or, I don't know, in which aspect, integration, social, economics, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Innocent, for giving us that lived experience. We really appreciate that. So now we also want to have good time management. So maybe I will ask the panelists to take maybe 2 to 3 minutes because we have 2 more questions. So our second question is, what are the challenges that refugees face in the country of asylum? For example, the refugees who run into Kenya, the refugees who come to Nigeria, the refugees who are those who are internally displaced in Nigeria. So what are the challenges that they face? I know we have been mentioning it. Most of the panelists, we have been here and there. We are already talking about the challenges. So let's just take from 2 to 3 minutes each to share what the challenges are before we move on to our next question. So any of the panelists can begin.
All right. The challenges are actually enormous. And there are quite a number of challenges, from education, because they have left where they are used to, where their children were going to school, to a place where they are uncertain of their next move. So one of the challenges is education, finances. At this point, they have no financial strength to even get a secured place to stay. Housing is also a challenge because they just try to build shanties. I don't know if you know what shanty is. Like picking up materials to build something, the roof over your head, a shelter that you can stay. There is health challenge. They cannot have access to healthcare because they cannot afford it. They don't have insurance. In Nigeria, insurance in the health system works. So they don't have insurance and don't readily have available funds just in case the children fall ill, because when they move like that, causes a lot of epidemic. There is a breakout. There is a breakout of many things, and we fight malaria. We're fighting malaria. There are mosquitoes because the environment where they are now, maybe it's just a place where if an empty land that the government will just have to clear the bushes, the trees, fall all of that down so that they can, have somewhere to stay. Feeding, food, the issue of food is also a challenge with these people, and then for the family, there is a sense of their value. They lose their value. So I think I should just hang in there for others to also talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Aimee. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I go next because on the screen.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the challenges are many. Everything is challenging when it comes to refugees. And, when you look around and you see, for example, their own country citizens are suffering, what about the refugees? And they're suffering not because there's a problem, but they're suffering because the social system maybe is not working. There's no social system, there's no social safety net. And, that's that social component, that's the one that normally will be extended to the refugee as well, because they are also vulnerable as other vulnerable in the country. But already if the country resources are stretched, then it will also stretch even more to the refugees who should only rely on NGOs. And NGOs, they don't have a permanent budget. They rely on donation. And an NGO can operate for a couple of years or even months, and they disappear, and they leave the refugees in the air. And then again, another organization should come in to even fill the gap. But for someone who is living in such situation of uncertainty, where everything is blurry, it doesn't work like that. It affects a lot on their mindset. And you can't even talk about tomorrow. You're only talking about today, because tomorrow you don't know if that NGOs, the donor of that NGOs decide to stop funding. What about you? Where are you going? And at the same time, you're constrained to do anything for yourself. Then you don't have any other option than waiting to die and watching. And that's where actually we see most refugees, they even keep moving. They come to Kenya, they feel in Kenya it's not working. They go to the next country. Yes, there are so many underlying issues for people on the move to keep moving. But most of those, they are because of dissatisfaction, because of frustrations, because of limitations that they face. Then they feel, maybe if I go to the next country or the next location, maybe things will be better off. Maybe I go where people don't know me even, to start afresh. And so that in this, I can find myself a space where I could explore. So living already as a refugee, having that status is already a challenge by itself. And that challenge can only be leveraged until we can change the perspective of the community.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Innocent.
I'd like to say something little. I really appreciate what both Aimee and Innocent have said, because those really are the burning issues. And this takes me back to my target. I mean, it's just always to do with the local government, the authorities. They know exactly what needs to be done. They have the capacity to do it. They have the funds to do it. And they also have the partners to come and support. And they don't allow it. And it is really an annoying, I think we with the previous 3 governments, here I'll speak in terms of Kenya. What I believe happened is that the then president intimidated the locals to a point where, to date, people do not speak. No matter what is said or done, people don't speak, even when you know that what is being done is outrageously wrong. And I think that they have then taken advantage of that, and that is why we're in the crisis that we're in. If it were possible to reverse that, yes, it is possible. If we were to be bold enough to be courageous and stand up and say, we're not going to allow this to happen, we would not be having a problem with people who come in as refugees, or even those who are in the countries as internally displaced persons. They would come in, be healed, be settled, be prepared and be able to move on. It's a cycle, because everything in life is a cycle. But what these guys have become so crude about is coming up with systems, and that will create a barrier to those things being successful, because, like I said earlier, this is their source, has become their source of income. So there's no way that they can allow us to take it away from them. That, for me, I think is the core problem within all the countries, and this is everywhere. It's not just in Kenya. Once they realize how much can come in, they don't want you to get better, because they're using you as their channel of income.
Thank you so much, Njoki.
You're welcome.
Eva, do you want to say something?
No, it would be repetitive of what the other panelists have said. So I think, yeah.
No problem, no problem. Anyway, that gives us more time for our third and final question, right? So finally, we are asking, what can we do better? We have given all this, we have given our,
Excuse me.
We have shared our, sorry, someone else is speaking?
Someone is here. It's David. I've been in this call and I've been listening quietly. I think there's something I'm trying to get clearance for, and that is, there has to be a distinction between professional refugees and the actual internally displaced persons that really need help to survive, to see the next day, to have the next meal, to have the next drink. So these ones who are really, really indigent, who are in need. Now there's a clear dichotomy. We need to understand what our focus are. Like the last speaker, the man, the other guy, that was
Innocent.
Innocent said that somebody will come and say he's not used to a place where there's no light, and he will move to another refugee camp and say this is better. Those ones are professional refugees, and I think they have choices. But what about these ones that have no choices? And what about these ones who are looking up to anything, for assistance? And that is our case in Nigeria. That's our case in Nigeria. So we need to, factor in these differences, and let's know where the greater needs lies, and let's also accord them with the necessary attention and the emergency that they require. So that I heard that, and that was why I stepped in. I'm not a panelist, but I had to step in, to ask that. I hope we are taking that into cognizance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much. If any...
sorry, could I please say one very short thing about what has just been said? I totally agree with him. I totally agree with him, because that is actually becoming our primary problem now. But the locals are also becoming the stepping stones of the supposed help that the authorities are giving to the refugees / IDPs, because they are lacking and nothing is being done for them. And that's how it's slowly, the leakage is coming out a little in small bits. You'll find that families in all these areas, they probably haven't eaten, they eat like twice or thrice a week. Nobody talks about them. Even the state they're living in is just unbelievable. So if we had the heart to do it for our own, in the same way we would do for those who are quote unquote passing through. And so again, it all goes back to systems and structures. Yeah, which are there but are not made use of. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
So sorry. Come again. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Thanks. I was just emphasizing that even the locals are also being affected. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Njoki. Yes. Thank you also for your insight, David. We will have, after the panelists, we will have a short presentation by 𝐂𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐧𝑠 Global, and then we will have a question and answer session. So if any of you, and somebody else who feels like they have something burning to ask, we will have a session for that as well. So please, we can just wait so that we allow everyone, all our panelists, to give their opinions, then we can all have all the questions at the end during the question and answer session. So for our final question, we are asking, what can we do better we have given our opinions, we have given our insight, we have shared our experiences. So what can we do better to integrate as our different countries? We have Nigeria and we have Kenya. What can we do better to integrate refugees into our communities? What can we do better? What are our best practices with all now that we have learned and all that we know and all that we have experienced?
Laura, I'll start off. I'll piggyback on what Innocent had said in terms of education. How are we educating one from the host community, but also the refugee community? I think education from a perspective of awareness, but also knowledge that these are human beings just as we are, and how do you then support them? But then also, how do you not regard them from a point of suspicion? How do you also understand from a language perspective? What are the key things that we could do from language so that then we don't feel that they are speaking something different? But then also what everyone then is saying, what are our structures within either from a policy, but even from a social perspective, from the perspective of what do I mean by that? How do we understand that the next person requires your help, and also that the person also who's with you as well requires the help? So from the host, they're struggling, and also from the refugee, they are struggling. So how do we also do that cross-learning so that when these agencies that also Joki is talking about and come in and are providing resources for the refugees, how do they also bring out resources as well for the host community that might be struggling? And I do know these aspects that happen, at least at the refugee camps, but from an urban perspective, that's still quite a big challenge. I'll give an example. I do know that, for example, in Ruiru, which is in Nairobi, there's a big community, I think, of Rwandese that just live about, I think, 30 in one small house, and they have no food. So they're doing manual jobs across in Ruiru, going into restaurants, asking if they could do the sweeping, and there's an aspect of also now, what has been going on is that the host community, they ask for a less fee. So for example, if a service to be provided for cleaning is 500, then they ask that please pay us 300. Now what's happening is that there's an inequality from an economic perspective to the ones who are within. So if you find a cleaner who normally would be paid 500, now people are preferring to go for the Rwandese, and then now that creates suspicion, but they're trying to fend for themselves. So how do you communicate that even from the business perspective? My second point would be from aspect of entrepreneurship support. How do we build up on entrepreneurship and gaining revenue, not just for the host community, but also for the refugee community? How do we, our biggest, from an MSME perspective, is the informal sector. A lot of business in Kenya is done at the informal perspective. So we're about 54 million Kenyans, but I think we're 10 million that pay taxes or that are recorded at the Kenya Revenue Authority as paying taxes. How do we get these communities contributing to the tax, so that then also they feel that they can also benefit from the social security aspect? But then also, I like the aspect that Innocent then also brought out. They have this refugees come in with different ideas. How do we harness this different ideas to grow our entrepreneurship within the host community? And I know that would also then be beneficial from a policy perspective. If the government sees that there's revenue coming in, if the community see that there's revenue coming in, then that gives an improvement also for even for the refugees. So that would be my two things: awareness and knowledge, and education, however we look at it, but then also then entrepreneurship. How do we grow that?
Thank you. Thank you, Eva.
Could I again please step in here and piggyback on Eva? Awareness and all the opportunities. If I could use an old example, I worked in an organization where we did the same. We trained people, got them to do things on their own and become independent. So what we would do is give them the financial support, then the technical support, we would engage the government. And that time, sorry to say it this way, but the government was a lot more functional and engaging. So they would provide this technical support, we would do the financial support, and then everything else would come from the community so that they also have a sense of ownership. This is not being done for them by us, it is being done for them by them. And what they didn't have, we would provide. And that I found to be extremely sustainable. And in terms of those who would then come in, whether as IDPs or refugees, they would also receive the training and use that as methods to keep themselves fed and working and busy doing something during the day. And they would then be the ones to say, we're ready to go back home, especially once they get a sense that home is more there's peace and they can actually go back and be safe. They are prepared to go back because they've also learned a new skill that can keep them going for the rest of their lives. Yeah. So I mean, my prayer would be that we can get back to a system like that. Yeah.
Okay, where we're involving them.
The government is very well equipped. They have everything that is required. It's just not being put to good use or to the fullest. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joki.
Yeah, maybe to add up, I think there's no good or bad answer. It's all about understanding what is available and how best can you use what is available. Because we are seeing inequality even in normal society. You know, they are the poor, the richer, and the middle class, and so on, or the extreme poor and the extreme richer. So those inequality are the source of most of the problems, because inequality by itself can create even new problems. And for example, once the refugees are discriminated in a host country, it's already inequality when it comes to refugees in regard to the locals, which means the refugees, instead of becoming part of the solution, they'll immediately become part of the problem, because now they'll fight for themselves, they'll fight for what maybe can keep them going the next day. And, you know, those are the key challenge that we need to address, to try as much as possible to build that equal society where everyone has equal access to resources, to opportunities, and that's how we can even use that to eliminate some of the problems that we can't even know or we can't see, because there are those that are seen, those that are unseen, and those that are unseen are the most dangerous, because they'll come unexpectedly and they surprise everyone. But if we can be in a position to put everything clear, to have equal society, to have enabling environment, to have, let's say, inclusive policies, then we can unlock most of the potential and we can eliminate most problems that we don't know or that we know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Innocent.
Sorry, could I please step in a little bit again? In line with what Innocent has just said, one thing I was to mention is collaboration. That really worked before. There was no fighting for space and fighting for the money. This element of greed, and it's even if you're not skilled in that area, you want to take up the responsibility. That never used to happen before. So again, if there's a way we can get back to that, I believe that when you let the community take up ownership, there's a lot to do with self-value, and just by so doing, we show them that we respect them, and they will also respect us, and everybody works together in harmony. And there's improvement, there's impact, and there's also the sustainability. So there's that element of collaboration and valuing people as human beings. I think is really crucial. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Joaquin.
I think I'm just going to add this. We have to bring in campaigns, because we have itemized some very vital areas or things that should be done amongst these people that have come into the society they're not used to. By the time we start, maybe they are not even aware of what they can do to better
Aimee?
Hello, can you hear me?
No,
can you hear me?
Aimee, we lost you for a minute there.
I'm sorry about.
It's okay. Okay.
A call is coming. I'm sorry about that. By the time we start campaign, tell them what they need to know on how they can move forward. It's going to help the society that they are in. It's going to help both displaced persons and the citizens of that particular, if it's a country of the country, if it's like we in Nigeria, it's our people, we are, you know, against our, we like to say we are against ourselves or we are for ourselves. We're wrong on campaigns. Wherever there is inequality, we talk about it. What is the way forward? We profile solution. We tell them this is how we can move forward. You know, our challenges should not be more than us. We are more than the challenges. All we have to do is think of possible solutions, profile those solutions, act on the solution, and then everybody's going to be okay. It's going to take a little time, but if we focus on campaigns, if it is on education, can we see that our children go back to school? What are the government schools that have no fees attached? What do they need? Is it the clothing? We give them the school uniform. Is it the sandals? We provide for them. What exactly will make them move forward? Because there has to be a forward movement. That is why we're having this conversation. And then when it comes to the financial aspect of it, it is time we as a people put our voices together. I don't want us to have to let the sessions not be too long, but let it be meaningful, concise, and impacting in a way where we meet the United Nations with our voices, with our work on ground and our papers. The United Nations will give us the backing we need to right the wrong. This is my little contribution.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aimee. And thank you so much, our panelists, for sharing all this. We have now shared what we can do better. So I want to give this opportunity, I want to give a moment to 𝐂𝐫𝐞𝐧𝐬𝐧 Global Foundation, and they're going to take us through their refugee village concept, right? So I welcome you, 𝐂𝐫𝐞𝐧𝐬𝐧, and then after that, we will have a short session of a short Q&A session before we can bring the event to an end. So 𝐂𝐫𝐞𝐧𝐬𝐧, the floor is yours.
Okay.
You have about 20 minutes for your presentation. Huh?
Okay. I want to say that our presentation is going to be on our subsequent discussion, because the time that is given, I don't think that time is good enough. I think we should, I think we should not just exhaust everything that we have for this right now in one day, under 2 hours, because what we're talking about lives, we're talking about transformation, not just to come model up things and then we cannot see a way forward. We want a situation whereby whatever it is that we're talking about, especially as it has to do with these lives are valuable. Lives are not to be joked with. So I don't think that we should have that discussion further on this particular day. I think it should be moved to when next we're going to meet. What we are talking about now, it's critical. It's very, very critical. It's fundamental. So let's exhaust the 2 hours we have on these questions you have asked and proffer the solutions, the immediate solutions that we can give to the community, and then the ones that we know that it looks, it's Herculean in nature. Let's put it in writing, and send it to the larger body and see how it flies to the United Nations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. So just to let you know, for the panelists and also for the participants, what we have started today is a series of conversations. So we're going to be having different things that we're going to be discussing in different conversations. So I may have said that they won't, what the time that they have been allotted is too little for them to exhaust everything that they needed to share with us. So allow us, we hope that you will join us in our next conversation as well, so that we can discuss this further and in a more in-depth way. So now I will open the floor for questions. Questions concerning the discussions that we've had before we can end our session for today.
All right, I think I see a hand up, Artie.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, hi, no problem.
Okay, please go ahead.
I think
please go ahead,
this has been such a wonderful listen-in for me. So I'm from India, and I think Africa and India share a long history of what we are not able to see or somehow able to also feel is the history of colonization. And every word that I heard today with Ime, with Ava, with Innocent, with Joki, everything to me is asking the bigger question. You know, I mean, it's just making me ask the bigger question that, fine, so we've got NGOs coming in and working, and then there's money that's being sanctioned, and then we don't see that money. So where is that money going, literally? I think there's a huge hand at play here. And another example of that is that every time we have stable leadership within the African countries, it gets taken down. That is my perception sitting on the other side of the world. But that clearly marks, it outlines the way forward for us to create pools and pools of leadership that have gone through that suffering, that those pools that understand that there is a duty to be performed for what we leave behind for the generations to inherit, like it is said. And I can tell you this because I've worked in the space of rehabilitating young people when they've been taken in as terrorists, and there's such a huge challenge that once they're caught by the army, how do we mainstream them into the normal life? So there is this huge stigma that gets attached. The whole divide between the us and them gets even more amplified when we know that there is this unknown force that is always breaking the leadership of the country, and bringing in a leadership or allowing a leadership to surface that is unable to see something so evident in front of all of us. I think that is the playground moving forward, because I also happened to speak with a gentleman from the Nakivele refugee camp once upon a time. And he told me, there are 200,000 people living here in the refugee camp. My response was that, ever wondered, anthropologically speaking, when 200,000 people get together in a spot, it may not be a refugee camp, but a village in the making. So it is also about, literally educating people through that narrative. And I think, someone spoke about the campaigns that need to be launched. I think those campaign designs have to be centered very, very deeply around what is the root of what is going on. Because, well, Africa is, the place where the first peoples of the world really surfaced. So, and it has been entrenched in really understanding life and our existence from a laws of nature perspective, something that Violetta opened this session with. So if such a huge landmass has such a huge rootedness, then in the present day, and I don't see the present day any different from the days of the past, the colonial days, the obvious colonial days. And I think it is about just those few good actors who, I'll again use the word, amplify this truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Artie. Thank you so much for that. Do we have anyone else with a question or an opinion or a concern that you'd like to raise?
Maybe I could just emphasize again the need to partner for the organizations that are going to be involved and the people they are serving. This I am more than or I am higher than, really, I don't know where that came from. And I think that's one of the things that really causes ineffectiveness in all that is done. And definitely to pass on the sense of ownership to the people that are being served. And that way they can, there's continuity in that, and there's definitely an impact. And without that, we'll never get out of this cycle. And I believe it's not just a matter of finances and the food stuff and everything that is needed, the housing. It's actually just that sense of ownership. Pass on the knowledge and the skills to the people, and let them be. They are the ones who live in those communities. They know what they need. So show them. Some people come in like, here, I've got some money. I want to do this for you. And maybe that is not the thing that they want. They want something else. So find out what it is that they want, what they need. Let's give them what they need. And that way they will be able to continue it and pass it on to the future generations. Yeah, because I think that the government and partners come in with either financial support, the general resources that are required, either human resources or technical or financial, whatever it may be, pass it on. We've got to pass on this baton. Yeah, and I think that is where this hoarding thing is what has really brought down a lot of these systems that were once in place.
Thank you. Thank you, Joki.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just to say that I think one of the misconceptions that I have seen a lot with the refugee community is when they come into a country, we rather as host countries, we assume that they do not know anything, or they're not knowledgeable, or they don't have skill sets. And I think that misconception is what also creates part of the discrimination that comes about. Because even if you look at how governments handle refugees, you find that they may look for either the most remote place or where they would have least resistance. And you may find that actually these refugees had a life before they got displaced.
Right.
And in that life, they had skills, they had knowledge. There's so many things that they can add on to the community that we are not really taking advantage of. So you find that you may have even doctors within the camp, but they're not doing anything because, they're assumed not to know anything. So yeah. So I think the aspect of making sure that we change the narrative, how we see them, that they also have knowledge, they also have skills that can be useful to us, even as a host country. So when we look at it from that perspective, it's easy for us to collaborate with each other, as opposed to looking at them from a point of either they're a nuisance or they're intruding, that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Looks like we've lost. Flora has dropped off the call. Or Flora, you can hear us? No worries. Maybe I'll just give the next couple of minutes to anyone else who may have something to add.
Okay, let me remove the silence. I'd like to share an example of an incident that happened in line with what you've just shared. One word that came to mind is helpless. I remember one time the government had some immunization program that they used to give to children, and they would go out to the quote unquote most remote areas. I'm sorry, I'm talking in terms of the host country and with the locals. And they were getting so upset that here they are going all the way out there, they're taking them all the immunization, and the women don't bring the children for immunization. So one time I was speaking with the Pediatrics Association chairperson, and he says, I'm really frustrated. We're getting so frustrated because we have all this medication and it's not being taken up by the mothers. What should we do? And I asked them what was the problem with the women not coming. They said they've got so many chores, they have to go out, fetch water, do this, do the other. So as far as they're concerned, the child is not sick. So why should I stop what I must do to go and take the child for immunization when the illness there's no ailment? And I was like, why don't you then look into, we were having a group discussion, why don't you then look into taking the water to the women and take the immunization there. Go to where they are. Don't always sit back and wait for them to come to you. So when you gave that story about, when you talked about how perceiving them as helpless and, it's such a, what we think is obvious, but it's not as, I don't know why it comes out not as obvious. And yet all you have to do is work with the people. Don't do things for them. If you did things with them, it would be so obvious that, this is what they must do. So come and get into their program and do your thing while you're in there. Yeah. So that's what came to mind, and I just thought I'd like to share it.
Yeah. And it's very true. That's very, because there's a perception and there's the reality.
Yes,
Florence.
Exactly.
Hello, Florence.
Yes, David.
What she just pointed out reminded me of a situation, and this is a conversation. I'll like us to just give me some input. We're learning, and our learnings that we're also sharing. There is a situation we had here. We had to work with one of the international NGOs that are into family care. What they do is they provide family planning methods and everything that surrounds family planning. And one of the things we observed was that the families that are in the internally displaced camps, they are growing by the year. The population is not controllable. So we thought about, okay, our organization, can we partner with these other Society for Family Health? Can we partner with them and then do some kind of campaign so that we can help the mothers? You are here, you are displaced, you can barely feed, there is no source of income coming in, and you are still producing. So we started a campaign. It was like we were even gaining grounds. They were welcoming us. Whenever we go for campaign, we also give them, because there's an initiative we have, touch before the talk. Before you touch me, before you talk to me, can you touch me? Can you touch an area where I'm suffering? Can you meet that need? So we were meeting a need, and then we were doing the campaign so that we could meet another need. The campaigns went on very well. They were receptive, because even in this, in Nigeria, we have language barrier. We had interpreter that was interpreting. When it was time for filling of forms, because their consent is needed, we didn't find even one woman who agreed to have a contraceptive or to have the injection or to have, one form of family planning or the other. So I was bothered. By the time we went again to research, okay, why were they not filling the forms? And some of them, they were like, this is the only thing that they feel will bring them out of what they are experiencing. When they have children, their children will grow up, and then their children will bring them out from the sufferings that they are experiencing. So I was like, seriously? So how can we really convince in the area of population to curb the growth because we are not able to handle their needs, their day-to-day needs.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you empower, because we've done programs of empowerment on, small scale businesses, skills, and all of that, you give finances, and then when you're coming back to monitor the progress that has been made, there is not much progress made.
Mm.
I just want us to, I know that it's a little bit of deviation, but it's worrisome. How do you help the people that don't even want to be helped?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to that, because I'm also thinking in a sense, some of them believe that if my children are born in this country, then they're automatically citizens of this country. They have rights, they have opportunity. So there's that aspect, and then there's the aspect of course, generational progress. So when you think about it, a lot of times you'll find that they lean more towards having their children having that citizenship rights, because then they get rights. Sometimes it could even be like they connect with the locals so that they gain that entry point. So sometimes that is not something that I would say is easy to control, but I guess working together, collaborating as we change that narrative, because a notion has already been put across, and has been there for years. But by beginning the change of culture, beginning the change of mindset, and that's why we're having this sort of conversations, is to try and change that narrative so that things begin to change from what we've seen before to what we can now do better, or how we can change things better now. Because I mean, I can't say that at any point in time that we'll stop having refugees, because refugees are as a result of, it can be extreme weather conditions, it can be war, it can be all the reasons that can create a scenario where you have refugees are so many. So we cannot assume and say that it's only war-based or like that. So we need to also have a way to just collaborate and begin to change that mindset.
Yeah, awesome. So in Kenya,
mm-hmm.
Don't you experience some kind of natural disaster, or things like communal clashes and all of that throws people out of their home for a time being? Is it only these foreigners that come in and create and become refugees in Kenya? Is that what it is?
No, we also have internally displaced persons. And of course, this has been brought about by, we've had political clashes, like in 2007. We've had weather, which has affected people, and they've been forced to move out from where they live. So it's not just looking at it from a perspective of the foreign refugees, but even the internal refugees, because you find that within the country, there are different communities. And so even within the communities, there's a notion, there's a stereotype, for example, for the different tribes and everything. So and that's where now the change begins with us. We need to also look at it from a point of, how do we then stop being discriminative and begin to become more collaborative in how we approach people who've been displaced, not just from outside the country, but even within our own country.
You've brought something to mind that I'd like to add. People, the marginalized groups, and I will highlight those with people with disabilities. If they could also be included in the inclusivity, could come from a point of, you are another human being, not another alien. Allow me to use the word alien, and because it's really it doesn't impact on their lives. They are part of the community that is being served, whether refugee or local, but they get they don't get the attention that they deserve just because of the disability. And yet that is not always the issue. The issue is just being another person, just like those that they are living with here. So and there are also other, So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's why we say, we are creating the change so that we connect humanity back together, because we've been in a space where there's been a lot of disconnect between humanity. And now by creating a change, we're able to bring more people together. We're bringing back that element of humanity. And I like how you put it, Njoki, because that's essentially the essence of having this conversation, because these are the conversations that very few people talk about. They don't, like, it comes off as a taboo when you bring them up, or when people now begin to talk about it, it comes off as a taboo. But I think now we need to create that change. We need to begin addressing some of these issues so that we see the change. We bring back that essence of humanity, and we make people feel that, a lot of times we make people feel that it's their fault that they've been displaced, but a lot of times it's not their fault. It's not something they chose for themselves. Yeah.
True. I agree with that. Sorry, just again, you bring to mind, there's a song that used to be, that is sung by Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney, Ebony and Ivory. And that is exactly happening within humanity. We're all treating each other like, you and me, and yet we are us.
Yeah, that's true.
I think we should be living in perfect harmony with one another. Thank you for that.
Maybe one additional is also on the aspect of stacking, because someone might leave their place or displaced due to conflict or disaster or whatever. And wherever they'll go, they'll find themselves in a limbo whereby they are going to stack. And you don't know how someone who's stuck is going to behave. It's like someone who's drawn in a sea, how that person will fight for their life. And what about that person who is stuck? And they can see the opportunities around them. They can see that it's just a matter of goodwill. And that goodwill is cut across. It's not only about goodwill among the people, but it's also good political will. It's also about economic, social, like a lot of things comes into aspect for that person to unstuck. But it's good, such conversation, to drive those kind of, to bring in the forefront such issues that, they are not the direct issues, but they're result of maybe the policy, the result of the perception, the result of anything that is surrounding or is around the refugee or the displaced context. And this doesn't only stops on the international refugees, those who are crossing borders. It's also even extended to the IDPs who, contrary to the refugees, they are the local citizens who are who are facing maybe a challenge. Imagine, for example, a village, there's flooding in a village, and the people have to move because maybe their shelter, their livelihood, that their crops have been devastated. Then they need to move to somewhere safe. That person, as long as they move, they are forcibly moved. They becomes part of the problem, and everyone look at them as a problem, and that's where those people will stuck, and they will not be even able to go back to their place where they came from, because they're stuck. They're stuck not to move forward, they're stuck not to go back. Then they find themselves in that situation. Their children not going to school, themselves not able to provide even for the most basics one, because they are looked as others. They're no longer being looked as part of the community, and yet they are citizens like any other. And those people who take initiative to move, let's say, from a village to urban area, or from one county to the other county or district to another district, those people, they are mostly welcome because they do it by choice. But those who are forced to do so, they are mostly forgotten, and that is beyond them. These are the people who need to be looked at with empathy, and to try to see, if it were you, what could you do? and that's how we should address this and have this lens as we are looking forward. As 𝐂𝐸 mentioned about the campaign, I think the campaign should really be broad, because this is a very broad topic that we can't exhaust here. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'd like to add something, please, to what Innocent has just said. I love what you've said, Innocent, and again, I point my finger back to the government, because in every country, there's the pole in the middle that holds everything, and technically the government, that is the responsibility of the government. Then the collaborators come in and support the government to do that, and that way it will always remain within the government's remain the responsibility of the government to take care of its people, regardless of whether you're an IDP, a refugee, a person with disabilities, a person with anything. You are a human being who lives in that country, whether you're temporary or full-time. It is their responsibility to do that. And quite frankly, that used to really happen in Kenya a long time ago. And it's unfortunate, so much of it has just been buried under the sand. And people just pretend it doesn't exist, and technically it does exist. If that can be revived, I kid you not, we'd go so far, because every one of us will contribute as an organization, as an individual, and let everything flow. Everything must be flowing. Yeah,
that's true. Wow, this has been quite quite insightful. It's quite the session. I think. Well, we hope to make it a series of conversations, definitely have more people joining us, more people sharing their insights. Because of time, I think we can call it a day. I'd like to thank each and every one of the panelists. Thank you so much for coming through. Thank you so much for your great insights. I mean, today I feel like I've been in a class learning so many new things. Because personally, I can't say I've had an interaction with a refugee camp, or I've not been to a refugee area, but I have interacted with them on a community basis where they're already integrated into the community. So hearing their story is what inspires you to now get to know where did you start from, what really happened for you to get to this point. And I think for us to have that conversation, then we begin by making that change. And definitely we begin to see a change in how we receive the communities, how we embrace everything else. So on behalf of Ecocivilisation Africa, on behalf of Kenya chapter, thank you so much for coming through. Thank you so much for those who are able to attend. And I'd like to wish you a wonderful rest of the weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, Florence.
Thank
you for the invitation. Thank you for the participation. And thank you for all the and shared.
But you did not, Florence, you did not include Nigeria. Nigeria is also here.
Oh, yes. Kenya, Nigeria, we have India. We've been represented by so many different countries. I mean, wow. And Hope Raisers, thank you so much. I know this is just the beginning. And I'm looking forward to what we're going to do together, definitely.
Sure, Florence. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And thank you all the panelists. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Flora, for that seamless coordination. It was good. I joined along the line, but I really I got some insights, and that for me is a good one. So I look forward to more engagements and conversations around all that we're talking about. Thank you very much, and have a nice day, everybody. Thank you.
You too. Thank you so much, David.
I have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.